Thank you very much. Thank you. So it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and thank you so much to the guys who are organising to invite me. I thought we liked churches in England. You guys like churches a lot here. And I thought our coffee was strong, and my God, your coffee is really strong. And that's a problem because I think I speak quite fast anyway, and also I forget that I'm not in England, so there's a danger I might talk really fast. So I'm sorry, and I'll try and concentrate very hard and talk slowly so you can understand what the hell I'm talking about. Okay, so what I want to talk about today is soft skills, and I believe that it's the soft skills that really pay the bills on your projects. Let me tell you why. So just in terms of a bit of context, and you heard a little bit about me and the sort of work I do in the kind introduction there. I work for a company called CX Partners. We're an experienced design consultancy based in Bristol and London in the UK. We spend our days conducting lots of user research and designing experiences for the sort of people you see up there. I'm also involved in other stuff, writing books and organising conferences. And actually thinking about that, because of my involvement with organising conferences, I have a sense of how much work goes into organising a thing like this. Before I get stuck into my talk, I think it's probably worth giving everyone here who's been involved with organising this fantastic conference a round of applause. It did make me feel sorry for the guys when the lanyards didn't arrive this morning and everyone was turning up and the queue was growing, and just thought, oh, I remember that feeling. So thank you very much, everyone. So I realised this question was asked already this morning, and I was sat at the front and I didn't get a sense of who was in the room. I had a bit of a panic last night because I gave this talk last week to a UX conference, and then I was chatting to someone last night and it dawned on me that all of you guys are going to be doing very different roles. And so I wanted to get a sense of who's in the room. So let's play the hands up game. Who in the room is a developer? Front end, back end, doesn't matter. Loads of you, that's amazing. How about kind of designers, UXy people? Oh, that's good. Did anyone just stick their hand up twice? Yes. That's fine. Okay, how about product people? Project managers? Account managers, kind of salespeople, that sort of thing? Wow, we've got an amazing spectrum in the room. Okay, that's all good. That's good because I had a great conversation with a friend of mine after I gave the talk last week, and he said, oh, you know what you should do? You should go and give the same talk to a tech conference, like a dev conference. I reckon those guys will be really up for it as well. I thought, yeah, that's a good idea. And that's kind of what this has turned into. So I believe that this is not just relevant to the UXers in the room, this is relevant to everyone. And I want to kind of tell you a bit more about why I believe these soft skills are so important to our daily lives. I spend my time running large user-centered design projects for the great and the good of the web. And I was thinking once that some projects go really well, some projects don't go so well. And I was thinking, why is it that some projects go so much better than others? Why is it that some people are so much easier to work with than other people? And I couldn't really put my finger on what it might be. You sort of think about your colleagues, and I challenge you now to think about someone you work with who's just great to work with. They're good at their job. Everything just goes fine with when you work with that person. And what is it? What is it about that person that makes them so easy to work with? And I'd never really given that much thought before. When we, typically within a project process, of course, you start to pull together people to work on a team. And you know the kind of teams that will work well on particular projects, depending on the specific nature of the work you're going to do. And people always flash into your mind. And I thought, why is it that that person jumps into my head when I think about that sort of project? So I thought it would be cool to kind of pull these things out, and that's what I want to share with you today. And also I believe that, working together is so much more than just being able to do the job. It's all of the stuff that sits outside of that. I mean, we've heard some great examples of that already, around knowing when to say no, the kind of people skills that are important in projects, the things that make a massive difference that determine whether something is successful or not. So in terms of skills, you may or may not be familiar with this idea of kind of soft skills or hard skills. Let me tell you a bit more about them. So let's consider the mythical unicorn. I got picked up on this. Apparently, this isn't a unicorn. It's something called a pegacorn, which I didn't know exists. I think it's like a combination. But isn't it amazing? I saw it, I did a Google image search, I stole it off the internet, and I just thought, what a mythical creature, what a magnificent beast. So it's not the mythical unicorn, I apologise for that, but I think it's pretty cool nonetheless. So this creature is used, or people talk about, jokingly, this idea of this kind of UX unicorn, and that's used in the context of someone who can do everything. Unicorns don't exist, and often UX unicorns don't exist either, for right or wrong. I mean, you may work in a small company where you often find that you have to be the person who can do everything. In larger organisations, often you have the ability to be able to specialise, and that's fine. But unicorns are also always talked around these terms. So let's break the unicorn down, which seems a cruel and horrible thing to do, to treat it like a piece of meat. I was thinking about the different kind of skill sets that typically I feel people have, and they seem to fit into these broad areas, these criteria. I'm just going to tweak that because there's a little bit of rustling going on. So I'm just going to move less. Coffee again. Okay, so let's break the unicorn down. I've never said that sentence before, and that sounds weird. Okay, so in terms of the kind of skill sets that I believe, and again, I'm talking about UXs, but I think this is transferable. I think these kind of broad areas. So this idea of kind of core skills, topic-based skills, technical skills, business skills, and then the soft skills, which is the kind of sweet spot that I'll come on to later. So in terms of what I mean by these hard skills, let's kind of break these things down a bit further. So it may be the case that as a UXer, you're expected to have some experience and some competence in a really broad range of things, actually. And reflecting on some of the things that the guys were saying earlier, it's funny when you consider the breadth of experience or expertise that often you're expected to have within a job. It would seem unreasonable, for example, to be able to be a great researcher, to be a great designer, to be an interaction designer. Often these things are completely competing. You know, how could you expect maybe someone who's a very strong psychologist, for example, who's studied that, who is wonderful at, is great with people and is great at asking questions and extracting information. How would it be reasonable to expect them to be a great designer? Yet that's often the case, and vice versa. But it's often the case that you'll be expected to be able to do all of these things to a high level of competence. I think there's also this idea around this kind of ability around deliverables, often within client projects, and I work for a consultancy, so we're involved with commercial relationships with clients, and we have to deliver stuff. You know, deliverables are an interesting term in a more lean world, but the reality is this is often what you have to do, and you'll pass through these gates within a project where you're pulling things together, and you have to get sign off at particular parts. So you'll be expected to be able to do this stuff. You know, often that will be leveled at a UXer. You'll also be expected to have technical skills, and we've already talked today about this kind of idea of should designers code. That could be one aspect of a skill set that you may be expected to have. You may also be expected to be able to use all the kind of typical software. You know, the guys who are sponsoring the event, the things you'll see on. You know, within every project, you should be able to do that kind of stuff. But you'll also be expected to be able to make the computer work. You've got to set up a Google Hangout. You've got to be able to make Skype work. I don't know how you do that. I've never managed to do that still. I've kind of given up. But there's a kind of certain level of technical competence that will just make your working life easier. So you should be able to do all this. This is kind of taken. You've also got to have business skills. This is getting harder, isn't it? Isn't it amazing when you kind of think about the stuff you can do? It's kind of awesome, isn't it? You need to have business skills. So you need to be able to kind of manage your projects. You need to be able to manage your time. You need to be a professional, whatever the hell that means. You need to be able to work across different kind of cultural boundaries and appreciate other people. It's a hugely vast kind of gamut of skills that you're expected to be able to have to be able to thrive. But I would argue these are all kind of hard skills. These are the sorts of things that when you think about your role within the kind of user experience role, these will be the things that people will ask for and expect. But I don't think it's the things that make the biggest difference on projects. So what am I talking about with these kind of soft skills? Why do I think these are so important? I think when you think about the hard skills, I believe they're kind of becoming commoditized. It's like when you see a job description for a UX role, those will be the sorts of things you'll see. And because of that, I believe that makes it harder in some ways to get those kind of roles because everyone's competing against the same sort of skill sets. It's very rare that people ask for competence around these kind of soft skills. And I think this is where you can make a difference. And of course, the UX industry is booming and thriving. And every year, I kind of think, is this going to get bigger? And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. There's more and more and more and more. And people are flooding into the industry from lots of different professions. I had a lovely story recently from a friend of mine who's a fantastic UXer, who's been working in the industry for a long, long time. And he decided that he was going to take a course to learn how to build boats. So it's that classic thing, and it seems to be a thing in our industry. I'm making digital things. I want to make something with my hands. I want to make something that actually sees the light of day, and I can show my family, and they'll understand what the hell I do all day at work. That resonates with all of us, doesn't it? The dilemma of the industry. So my friend decided he was going to become a boat builder and use his hands. At the same time, he met a carpenter who was sick of using his hands and was deciding to get into the world of UX. So the grass is always greener and people are moving around. So what the hell am I talking about? What are soft skills? So there's a quote from the National Career Service, which is a site in the UK. Your soft skills are your personal qualities and they're your attitudes that help you to work well with others and make a positive contribution to organisations you work for. I think the amazing things about soft skills are that no matter whether you've been in the industry for many, many years or for 5 minutes, you'll have your own personal qualities and your own attributes that you'll bring to the industry from other roles, which will kind of enable you to flourish and grow and to kind of differentiate yourself from other people. So you may be new to the industry and thinking, how am I going to kind of grow and build myself within this industry? And the chances are you've already got those skills that you can use, which is a fantastic thing. You hear about people talk about, in terms of employing people, they're like, well, I just really like them. They were a fantastic person. I love their personality. They didn't have the kind of technical skills, but I can teach them the technical skills. That's okay. They've just got that kind of core. And that's the point I'm making. That's the important thing. I think with people who don't have those kind of soft skills, the idea of trying to change, imagine the prospect where you hire someone or you have people on your team and you think, they're going to be great. The only thing I've got to do is change their personality. It's like, excellent. Has anyone found themselves in that situation? What a nightmare. No one wants to be there. Not good, not good. So I'm going to talk through some of the individual kind of soft skills that I think are fantastically important. And the first one is pragmatism. Okay, so I think sometimes user experience people are kind of held up within projects as being the idealists. We'll ask the users, we'll spend time with people, we'll kind of be we'll uphold their needs throughout the process, and we'll just make everything perfect for people, regardless of the client's needs, regardless of the budget, the time, the constraints, and everyone else is like, come on, we've got to get this thing live. And the kind of user-centered designer is the person who's kind of really holding on to the beliefs from the user. But of course, you've got to be pragmatic. It's important that you hold on to the ideals of a user-centered design philosophy and methodology, but you can't forget about the kind of commercial aspects of a project. You've got to ship. So that's an important thing. So the key thing here is to be able to make that distinction between what to kind of fight for and what to let go. Which are the things that you will not concede and which are the things that you'll happily just say, fine, I'm going to let this one go. And that's a hard thing to do. And I don't think there's a kind of a clear-cut way of doing that. That's a judgment call, but it's hugely important. The other dilemma you'll face is that you represent the user during the design process, but you get paid by the business. So that's just, to me, a kind of fundamental paradox in many ways behind being a UXer within a commercial project. I mean, has anyone ever felt themselves conflicted in that respect? One? Yes, more than one. Excellent. It's not just me. Okay, fantastic. But of course, design is many things, as we've heard already today. But one of the main things I think of design as being a compromise. You have to decide when you concede. You have to decide where you can kind of let things go and just kind of let that process flow. So you will always have constraints. So if you can't work within constraints, you're going to really struggle. You're going to absolutely struggle within the industry. The other thing to bear in mind is this idea of design never being finished, which I found one of the most kind of liberating thoughts when it first came to mind. I mean, there's a real tension within design projects where you're being paid to do something that it has to be perfect. And often designers can feel that, or often designers can be perfectionists in many ways, and that's not a bad thing. But of course, you have to finish at some point. You have to kind of let go and you have to pass things on. So being pragmatic, I think, is hugely important, a massively important soft skill. Okay, communication, it feels like the sort of thing you do a kind of 101 course, and communication's important in work. Of course it's important. I think people typically think about communication in terms of talking, but I'd argue that listening is possibly more important in terms of, you know, being able to kind of demonstrate this kind of strength of skill. Being able to talk and clearly kind of share your vision and bring your ideas to life is hugely important. And if you can't do that, you're going to really struggle, because the chances are you guys in this room are very, very strong visual thinkers. You know, someone will give you a problem. We're probably all very, very good problem solvers. So I heard someone this morning, it was fascinating. We were talking about the problem. There's a massive queue out the door. We're running late. What's going to go on? And straight away someone was saying, well, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? They'd been given a problem, and within a second they gave 5 solutions to the problem. It's amazing, isn't it? And I'm sure we're all hardwired in the same way to do that. I think the problem we face, and the thing that frustrates us, is that the people we work with don't think about the world in the same way that we do. So when we're given a problem, we're programmed in many ways to start solving it in our minds, and often we can see the solution. But if you can't share the solution with someone, and you can't bring it to life in whichever kind of rudimentary format, whether it's a sketch or an example or a metaphor, then how can you bring people along with you? And that's such an important thing. Clearly it's our responsibility to kind of bring the lives and experiences of our users to life, and bring them to the projects we work with, and make sure that other people understand them. And how can you do that within the process? And a great way of doing that is by sharing stories. And we're all good at sharing stories, because it's kind of what we're taught to do from being children. We're read stories the whole time. We talk about stories with our friends and our families, and we recall anecdotes. And by sharing stories about projects, as we've already seen today, you can start to build a picture as to why you might want to do something in a certain way. Or you can help to alleviate a problem by sharing stories as well. It's something we're hardwired to do, and it's a great way of bringing things to life with the people you work with. I think it's really important to be able to be flexible and adaptable. Who's worked with someone who's really inflexible? Was that a bad experience? Yeah, it's a nightmare, isn't it? It's horrible. The other thing is that we've already seen this today. Design projects, the projects we work on, change all the time, don't they? You know, and that's just the reality of the way we work and the things we work on. You know, often we're given a brief, and no one really knows what the outcome's going to be. You go through this kind of chaotic period of time where you're just playing around with ideas, you're coming up with stuff that doesn't work, you're testing, you're refining, you're iterating. No one really knows what kind of path you're on, so you're on this kind of chaotic journey. So you have to be flexible, you have to be adaptable to be able to survive, and kind of change direction as you go. And we all know what that feels like, to work with someone who's not flexible. And that's often a way, when people describe people who are hard to work with, they use these kind of terms. That person wasn't flexible, and that's such an important thing to realise. Because things don't often go quite to plan, you have to kind of maintain this kind of positivity and resilience. And the wonderful talk before, talks about this idea of just kind of carrying on. You have to carry on, you have to push through. Who's ever worked on a project that went wrong? Or everyone, yeah? Whoever worked on a project that went really, 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 really badly wrong, rancid, horrific, nasty? Yeah, we've all been there. Awful, isn't it? Sometimes, you know, sometimes you just kind of have to sack it off and give in. But often you just have to kind of fight through, particularly if you're being paid to do the work. So you have to keep going, and you have to kind of learn to roll with the punches, and you have to kind of take that criticism. And I think that can be very, very hard as a designer, where you've taken the time to spend time with the business, understanding business problems. You've spent time with the users. You kind of had these competing demands. You really thought things through, and you've come up with something that's like, I think this is the only way forward. And then you get told you can't do it in that way, and that's really painful, and it's a horrible situation to be in. But I think it's important to kind of come up with your own survival strategies. You have to be able to contextualize the work you're doing and work out how you're going to get through that point and move forward, because you have to. You absolutely have to. And I think when I think of the people who are great at doing this kind of stuff, it's the people who are very good at motivating themselves. You know, they're very, very clear around what they want from a project. Often they've got lots of other stuff going on, and I think often when I talk to UX'ers and people in this industry, everyone's got a side project. Like, how many people in the room have got a side project on at the moment? Amazing, isn't it? And I was thinking about it on the way over, thinking maybe a side project is a nice way of kind of giving you something alongside your day job where you've got, maybe it's about having control. You know, I'm going to do all the stuff they wouldn't let me do on my side project. Screw you, because I can do what I want. And it's cool. But, you know, maybe that's the survival strategy, and maybe thinking about that, you know, it's important that we have these things that kind of allow us to kind of flourish and grow. And, you know, side projects are important for all sorts of other reasons. But I think that's a big part of that. The other soft skill I think is important is being confident. You have to be confident. You have to kind of exert your influence within a project. And I saw a lovely example of this on a recent project where some fantastic colleagues of mine had to do some guerrilla research. So by that I mean we didn't have a huge budget on a project, and we had a prototype, and we had to go and take that prototype out into the world and get some kind of user feedback on that thing. And it was much as this, it was a cardboard prototype of a ticketing machine that was going to be used at a bus stop. So picture the scene. We're in Bristol early in the morning. We had to take this giant cardboard prototype to a bus stop at a thing called a park and ride. So the idea is you drive your car to essentially a big car park outside of a big city centre, which stops people driving into the city centre. You then get on a bus to go to work. So it was early in the morning. We were there in high visibility jackets, hanging around the bus stop with this big piece of, like this big cardboard box. 7:30 in the morning, people started gathering around us, queuing up to get the bus. They really didn't want to talk to us. You know, in England we have this idea of kind of chuggers, who are charity muggers. So you're walking, you're going shopping. Do you have them here? Yeah, you know what I mean. Okay, so you're kind of going about your everyday life, minding your own business, and people bother you and they're trying to get you to donate. They thought we were chuggers. Okay, so you were walking up to them, they were kind of looking the other way. They got the phones out. They were using all the tricks in the book, and we're like, this is a nightmare. We've got no budget to do kind of traditional testing, lab testing, which may not have been appropriate anyway. And we have to get some insight. We have to, and this is our only chance of doing it. And we've got up really early, and this is a massive deal. And if we can't get the stuff we need to get, the client's going to hate us. It's going to be a nightmare. We will fail. And so what my colleagues were able to do is go up to people and bother them. And it was so awkward. It was terrible because you knew they didn't want to be talked to. And they were great. You know, they were very personable. They explained what we were doing. People were kind of anxious, thinking, oh, my bus is going to come, I'm going to be late for work. But they managed to do it. And they had to do it. They absolutely had to do it. And that takes absolute confidence, and it takes guts to be able to do that. To really, you know, clearly kind of put yourself out there, I think. Often you'll find yourself in kind of uncomfortable situations. You know, you may have to argue the cause within a very kind of uncomfortable situation. Maybe it's a big presentation to a client. Maybe the boss's boss, the hippo comes in. You know, the person you haven't met through the whole project, and they come in and they kind of they don't really care about your opinion. You've got to have that kind of front and that confidence to be able to put your kind of point of view across, and also to represent the views of your users, of course. And that can be a very hard thing. Often within the design process, you have to feel that you're persuading people, and you have to do that in the right way, and that can be a very intimidating thing to do. You may find that you disagree with people within your own team. I mean, I've worked in environments where kind of trying to influence a client or trying to kind of appease a client wasn't the problem. The problem was within the company. You know, there was kind of infighting and the politics, and just trying to get your point of view heard was the biggest challenge, and that's a massive deal. So I think that's a huge thing. I think we're lucky, you know, we work in a hugely kind of creative industry, and that's a wonderful thing. And if you're not creative, and if you're not a problem solver, then I think you're going to have some huge problems. You know, you're not going to thrive. You're going to find it very, very difficult. And design is problem solving, I think, in many ways. You're going to find yourself having to solve the smallest and the largest problems on every project. So you have to be kind of able to do that and willing to do that on a daily basis. The other thing I'd say is very important is to kind of maintain this sense of curiosity. I think typically strong UXers have inquiring minds. They're kind of interested in everything. And maybe that's the thing that's maybe led them to their career path. I mean, we often used to play this game in the office. It's like, who's qualified formally to do this job? And everyone's like, not really. What degree did you do? Furniture design. Really? I studied environmental science. I've got no right to be here whatsoever. You know, I studied geography, biology, development studies. It's another world, you know, it's amazing. But fundamentally, you find that people are just curious, they're interested, they're really the joy, I think, of every project that I find is that you're just kind of immersed into this new world that you never knew existed. You know, often you find yourself with a client you never heard of, who works in an industry you didn't realise exist, and then you start doing user research, and all of this kind of layer of stuff just kind of emerges that is absolutely fascinating. And that has to be something that you find useful, I think, to be able to thrive within this industry. Another key skill, I think, is to be able to kind of deconstruct something and unpick why it works. And that may be something like a restaurant experience. You know, why was that meal so good? Oh, it's because, you know, kind of the welcome they gave me was really sincere, and the environment was fantastic, and the way they presented the food, and wasn't the design of the menu interesting? And you start to pull things apart, and I think it's such a key skill to have, because if you can pull things apart, you can start to rebuild them and apply the things that you've learned to other contexts. And I think that's a brilliant skill to have, and it's hugely, hugely important. And in many ways, that makes you a bit of a thief. You know, you're stealing ideas from here, there, and everywhere, and sometimes you're probably doing it deliberately, and other times you're doing it without really realizing. But you're just kind of, everything you're designing is kind of a culmination of those things that maybe you've seen before. And I was talking about this the other week, and talking about how design is theft, and everyone's like, oh, that's a bit contentious. But, you know, I truly believe it is in many ways. You know, what is a design pattern if it's not something you're kind of reusing from something else? It's maybe legitimate theft because it's just the way that things work, you know, and why not reuse those things? It would make sense to kind of reinvent the wheel again and again. It doesn't make any sense. And fundamentally, I think you have to be genuinely interested in your client's problems. I heard a lovely story about a year ago when a colleague of mine finished a project, and the client's feedback was, thank you so much for caring. You know, that was the most important thing for the client, that they actually gave a shit about their problems. It wasn't just like, here's a problem, it's your job, do it, output, next job, you know, that kind of robotic, horrible situation. He genuinely cared, and that was the thing that made a massive difference, and that was the thing that the client felt was the overarching benefit of working with that person. Regardless of the great work that he'd done, he just cared about it, and that's massively important. I think if you're not interested in people, you're not going to get on as a UXer. It's not going to work. You know, fundamentally, you probably have to just be very much a people person. You have to care about people and the problems they have. And that is so fundamentally important. And if you're not interested in making things better, you're not going to get, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. And you don't have to be a UXer to be like that. You know, many people have to have those kind of people skills within their roles, who you know would make fantastic UXers. You know, the kind of skills you see people having within research who are essentially introduced to someone in a strange environment. You know, a member of the public comes into usability lab. It's weird. You know, what's going on with this place? It might have a two-way mirror. What a crazy situation to put someone in. Straight away, they put that person at ease. They make them feel comfortable. They explain what's going on. They kind of completely kind of, they bond with that person, and within a very short period of time, they're able to get what they need from that person. And that's an incredible skill to have. We've already talked about this idea of empathy, and I think empathy is often the thing that's talked about within good UXers have, you know, strong empathy skills, and that's true. It's absolutely true. If you can't see the world from the perspective of someone else, then you're not going to be able to kind of represent them within your design work, and it's such an important thing to be able to do. Another fundamentally important one, you know, if you don't have this desire to make things better, then what's the point? You know, why would you bother to fight those battles within your teams and with your clients? You absolutely won't. So you have to have this desire. You have to be continually trying to push and make things better. And, you know, fundamentally, I think we're privileged in many ways to work within our industry. The reach that our work can have is incredible. It's, you know, it can be terrifying when you think about it. Oh, I'm working on this page, and if I get this wrong, someone's going to lose a hell of a lot of money. It can be kind of stifling in many ways, but I think it's a wonderful thing. Another important area is this kind of idea of commercial acumen. I mean, you may not all work within agencies and consultancies, or even work within commercial environments. Some of you may work within the kind of the public sector, but typically you'll be paid by a commercial client, and you'll be working on a product that's making someone some money somewhere down the line. I talked earlier about this kind of conflict between user-centered design, or, you know, cash-centered design potentially, and there's this idea of, you know, kind of dark patterns where you're employed by the business to trick people to subscribing or to increasing their basket size. And there's a real conflict within the kind of UX industry around this, and it's a real hot topic. actually on dark patterns, read all about that. The kind of guy to follow there is a guy called Harry Brignall, who's fantastic on that, and he's got some great examples of this kind of trickery. UXers who've been pulled in by the dark side to conduct evil. Don't be evil. Don't be evil. There should have been another one. Didn't think of that. Damn. It's important to be able to understand how businesses work. You have to understand typical business models to be able to design solutions that kind of support that business model. You have to be able to speak and understand the language of business, but then be able to use that kind of language interchangeably. I mean, often it feels like we're a translator. We're kind of stuck in this world between the users over here and the business over here, and the business feed us with their crazy jargon, and you kind of absorb that and think, what the hell are you talking about? And you have to translate that to the users, and then it kind of works in the same way, and so you're this kind of filter. But of course you have to be able to talk that language to be credible through the eyes of the business, but you have to be able to talk the language of your users to be credible from that point of view. So you're absolutely that filter, very, very important. And of course, what makes a good UX person? I would argue it's that person who can be that sweet spot between the user and the business. I mean, kind of juggle these conflicting needs and come up with a solution that delivers for both of those groups. And that's a hugely complicated thing to do and very, very difficult. Also, to be a strong UXer in terms of your soft skills, you have to have leadership skills, and that talks about, this idea of confidence and influence. You have to be able to make decisions. We've all worked on projects where no one's made decisions. What a nightmare. We've talked already today about let me just talk to the person who's going to make the decisions, because this is lovely and we're having a lovely conversation, but nothing's going to get done. Someone has to make a call. And often on imperfect evidence and data, you just have to go with something. But hey, it doesn't matter. It's never finished. It doesn't matter. It's cool. So absolutely, you have to kind of lead by example. And strong leadership skills are very, very important, and they're always going to be important to you within the role you're doing now and the role you'll do in 5 and 10 years' time. This is probably the most important thing, and I don't know how well this translates, and I'm not going to talk about it in too much detail, but you all know what I'm saying. So we've all worked with people who haven't followed this rule. And when I gave this talk last week, people were saying, that's the most important thing you said. Thanks for saying that, because that's hugely important. We've all worked with people who haven't managed to do this and have had huge egos. And there's a bit of that, I think, knocking around within our industry. Hey, regardless of the role, that's the thing, isn't it? And we've all dealt with that, and that can be hugely challenging. And to the point chap before talks about having this kind of sense of humour. I think self-deprecation goes a long way on a project, and taking that backward step. I think that's hugely important. It's important to not be a pushover. There's a healthy tension often within design projects where maybe the UXer and the visual designer, these kind of turf wars that happen. Why are you doing the interaction design? That's my job. Your job. Just do the wire. Why are you doing the wireframes? You're amazing. It comes up again and again. But you have to stand your ground. But you have to not be a dick. It's hugely important. And maybe just acknowledge the fact that there's no such thing as a UX expert. Maybe that's controversial. I believe that there probably is no such thing. Your job is to kind of represent the users and kind of pass on their point of view. But no one really knows what's going to happen, do they? That's the interesting thing. No one knows how these things are going to work when they're released into the world. No one really knows. So, hugely important things to consider. I'm rambling, so I'm going to start wrapping it up. So, those are all the kind of soft skills I was thinking about. But the thing that's important is that these things are always going to be important to you within your career. As I've kind of moved from being a practitioner to being more of a kind of a manager, really. Then I found that these are the sorts of skills that become more and more important in my job. Those kind of hard skills I'm doing less of. I'm not using the tools, the software, I'm not doing that stuff anymore. But it's all about, leadership skills, communication, influencing. All of that stuff is the stuff that becomes more and more important. So as you move through your kind of career, I would argue that this stuff becomes more important. The other thing I talk about is a lovely conversation I had with a colleague of mine, Tam, who runs she's our head of human resources, so she spends a lot of her time interviewing people. And she was talking about the importance of soft skills when she's recruiting people, and which are the sorts of things that continually come up. And these are the sorts of things she talks about. she sees a real lack of this kind of listening skills within interviews. You know, she'll ask a question and people will give her an answer that's nothing to do with the question. Maybe because they have no answer. It's like, I don't know about that, but I know loads about this. I'm going off in this direction. And actually, you know, we've all been there. I've done that loads of times. So, you know, if you can't demonstrate listening skills, then you're going to struggle as a UXer, because you have to be able to listen to your client skills and understand those things. You know, again, echoing this idea of curiosity. Excuse me. Sorry. Is that better? That was annoying me. So being able to show curiosity, and they'll be asking specific questions to kind of pull out, you know, evidence of this within your interviews. So, you know, fundamentally, you've got to demonstrate that you are going to be that person who cares about the problems your client's going to have. You're going to have to be able to demonstrate that you will ask those kind of questions and just be endlessly curious. So this is a hugely important skill, and it's one that I should have put in my slides, around reflection. So having the ability to reflect on a project or even on an activity. You know, it might be a meeting that you've done, and after that meeting, sort of to be able to talk to your colleagues and say, actually, what would I have done differently? You know, what have I learned from doing that? How would I improve? And one framework you can do to do that, and something that we try and use when we give each other feedback within our kind of teams, is kind of what went well. So you sort of talk about all the good stuff, and then instead of saying what was the bad stuff, because people can feel threatened by that, you say something like, it would have been even better if, which is a softer way of framing it, and it's, oh, it would have been even better if we'd spent more time talking about that. Oh, it would have been even better if we'd spent more time preparing. It's a nice way of kind of just getting better. You know, you have to, I think it's important to feel that you just have to get better all the time. And we're never going to quite get there probably, but it's all about continual improvement, and that's the way we improve, of course. I've talked about flexibility and adaptability before. I mean, that's very, very important to be able to demonstrate that within an interview, and often it doesn't come across. So if you can't demonstrate your flexibility and adaptability, maybe that's a warning sign you're going to be difficult to work with. You know, if you're that person saying, this is the way I approach projects, I never take any other approach, it's the best process ever, you might be a bit difficult to work with. Also, I think it's important to be able to demonstrate how you can build relationships, because you're going to have to build relationships within your company, with your clients, with the users you interview, and that's massively important, hugely important for this role. So I guess in terms of what I'd urge you to do is start to bring some of these soft skills to life within your CV, you know, within your LinkedIn profile. It's important to talk about, you know, what you can do and what you have done, but it's also important to talk about the way that you go about doing this kind of work. So that's a good thing to do. Okay, so your homework for tonight is to try and work on one of these things. Pick one thing that you think that you'd like to focus on, and give it a try. You know, see what difference it makes within your client projects and within your working lives. And also think about the people that you work with, and think about the kind of strengths that they have in terms of their soft skills, and steal them. And think, right, I love the way that you're so, you know, someone may be fantastic, you know, a fantastic influencer. Watch what they do, copy how they do that, and develop your own skills. And see how you get on, and let me know. Thank you very much.